Hello and welcome to the show. This is the Sales for the Nigerian Business Person podcast. So, subscribe once you're done listening to the episode. It's available on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or any podcast player of your choice. And when you're done, remember to give me a 5-star review because so far I'm giving you more value than what you have paid for because this podcast is absolutely free and you have paid absolutely nothing. Now, today on the show, we're going to have a detour to handle one of the most popular objections that you're going to hear in your business. And that is when people say things like, that is too expensive, your price is too much, I found someone cheaper, are you trying to bankrupt me, are you trying to recoup all your profits from me, I beg, things are not that critical, whatever different variants that you've had. Because people can say all sorts of things, whether it's in English, in Pidgin, or in your local lingo, but the crux of the matter is they're trying to say something. And what they're trying to say is that the price that you have quoted, the price in your proposal, whatever it is that you've put out is too expensive. Now, when we're done looking at this objection, then we're going to go back to the audience question from Bernadette Mutsambiwe, because I haven't forgotten that we were on that. But the reason why I decided to do this was because I received one of those that's too expensive episodes, and I figured, one of those objections in real life. After I had written up a proposal for corporate training. And so I figured let's just use that as a case study since I'm a fan of using real life case studies, whether of other people or whether it's me. So I'm open to using myself, my mistakes and my mishaps as case studies as well. So before we begin, definitions. What is an objection? That's for those of you who are newbies listening to the show, if this is your first episode. The older listeners, you already know. So let's go, let's give a brief definition for the newbies. Now, an objection, when we're talking about sales and personal selling, those sorts of things, maybe even in marketing. Okay, no, not marketing. Let's just say sales and personal selling. These are reasons that people give for not going ahead or for not taking the next step. Those are also concerns that people have before they can make a purchase from you. And then it could also be things that people want you to sort out before they sign the paperwork. Sometimes it's misconceptions that the customers have about your proposal, about your offering, about your industry, about your package, blah, blah, blah. So whatever it is that is stopping them from taking the next step, those are things that we call objections. So if a customer doesn't want to drive to your office for a meeting because you're in a heavy traffic zone, that is an objection. In this case, you've met them, you're at the bridal store or wherever it is that you've met them, that's your wedding photographer, and you say, the next step, if we're vibing so much and looks like we're making progress, then the next step is you come over to the studio so that we can have a meeting to review samples. You propose that, they say, okay, yeah, that makes sense. They ask for the address, you tell them, and they say, the traffic in your area, man, that traffic is harsh. That's an objection. So we have to attend to this before we can get the relationship or we can get the business transaction to go ahead, because you're not going to move your studio location from where it is just because they want to buy. So this is a considerable concern. It's a considerable objection. It's a considerable whatever it is that you want to call it, that we have to attend to. Now, of course, there are different solutions you can offer to meet at theirs. Let's see what else. You can meet at a halfway point, different things. But I'm just using this to show you how there are times when, whether for substantial reasons or flimsy reasons, people do have concerns about why they can't take the next step. Then, if the customer says that the price is okay, but she says that your workmen look dirty, like they'll mess up her living room and not clean up after themselves, then that's also an objection we have to look into before we can move the deal along. Now, this doesn't apply to people who are wedding photographers, for instance. But if you provide carpentry services, painting services, plumbing services, electrical services, those sorts of things, then it's a concern that somebody has. Now, if you want to get the thing moving along smoothly, you have to look for a way to address those concerns. Whether it's to tell the madam of the house that, don't worry, my workmen are very neat. In fact, if you check out our 4.9 rating on Google, you'll see that people talk about how clean we are and how we leave the place clean and everything. Or you can say, don't worry, ma, that's not a problem. When the people finish, I have a separate crew that comes the next day to come and clean up and blah, blah, blah. but you get the picture. There's a concern right here, and that we need to address that concern before the deal moves on. So now we've looked at situations where the objection might be traffic, the location of your office, or maybe they're afraid about the mess that your workmen are going to make. So what do we do about when someone says your price is too high? You definitely have to tackle issues around price and value. Let me repeat, price and value. It's a two-way thing before the negotiations can resume. Because if somebody is saying your price is too high and you keep on trying to plow through, you're ignoring something that is critical over here. The person thinks that something is off when it comes to the price and the value equation. Now, our objection is a bad thing. Not always. There are some people who hear an objection and they get demoralized. So if you give a proposal and they say your price is too high, some people just get sunken and they get sad. There's no reason to get sad. It's the same thing with the workmen. Your workmen look dirty. You don't need to get sad. And you don't have to get frustrated if they say, oh, your office is in a high traffic place, so I don't want to drive there. So objections are not always a bad thing. But they do show that there are some fundamental matters that we need to attend to before we can make progress. So whether it's people don't want to be stuck in traffic, they don't want the house to be dirty after the work is done, or they don't think they're getting enough value for how much it is that they are paying. So it's just a signpost. It tells us that there's something fundamental that we have to pay attention to. Now, there are times that an objection could be a sign that there is trouble ahead and it's now time to divorce the customer. For instance, there's some of you that have been in the situation, and I've been in that situation, where people object on price, and then you make 3 concessions. They say 1.5 is too much, and you say, okay, no problem, let's do it at 1.3. And then it's now time to pay the deposit, and they say, you know what, that 1.3 self, I beg, that 1.3 is too much. And you guys go back and forth, and you say, okay, no problem, bring 1.2. And then it's now time to pay, and they say, you know what, that 1.2 price, that 1.2 is too much. In fact, apart from that, I even have this thing that we need to attend to, that thing that we need to attend to. Now, in that situation, it is a sign that this is the kind of customer you should run away from, because you've made several concessions and your quote is probably lower than whatever the cheapest industry standard is, but yet they're still complaining and they're looking for things to heap on board. So in this case, an objection might be a sign that this is the customer you want to divorce and run away from. So objections, not always a bad thing. They are definitely signposts that we need to pay attention to some things, but sometimes it's a sign that this is a customer we want to run away from. So, like I said, why am I talking about this kind of objection today? Is because I got it recently and would like to share what I think is the optimal mindset for dealing with this. Now, there is no one way. There are different ways of doing with it, and we'll explore some of those in time. So, my assumptions in tackling the question today is that even though you might be a first-time listener of the podcast, you are definitely not a newbie when it comes to business. So you have done business before. Because if you're a newbie, then you might actually run into the problem of guessing at prices, and your prices might seem unreasonable for your level, for your expertise, things like that. Because as at this time of recording, on the 2nd of December 2023, that's when this episode was recorded, nobody is going to pay a first-time photographer 500,000 naira for wedding photography. Whether in Abuja, my guess is whether in Lagos. It's just not going to happen. Because if you're a first-time wedding photographer, you have no track record, you have no previous clientele, you have no portfolio that you can show, you have no trading history to speak of, you have no Google reviews, you have absolutely nothing. Now, I know of these kinds of mistakes because this is a mistake that I made myself, because when I first started off in wedding photography close to a decade and a half ago, I charged several hundred thousands on my first quote. And of course, that didn't work out. But then it now made me freak out and go the other way. And I made the other mistake of taking my first wedding for 50,000 naira. But let's remember, that was 15 years ago. Well, even for then, 50,000 naira was low, but that's a story for another day. But bottom line, I'm just trying to say that if it's your first time in business, yes, it's possible that because you want to shoot for the fences and, you feel like you're top dog or whatever, you might give a price that actually is too high and doesn't reflect your expertise, your previous clientele, your trading history, your track record, things like that. So yes, newbies, they do make that mistake. You come in and you see that Madam this or Oga this person is charging 1.5 and you think, okay, It's my first year in business, but who cares? I know I'm as good as this person. I'm going to charge 1.5. It doesn't work that way. Now, for my present scenario, I wrote out a proposal for a 3-week engagement at just over 400,000 naira. Then the usual objection came in, there's no way that we're paying 425K at this time to train 2 members of staff. Now, like I said, most people hear this and then they become sunken and they go into defensive mode. Now, that's not the way to handle these sorts of things. My recommended approach is this. You have to requalify and do rediscovery. Now, those are technical terms. If this is your first time of listening to the show, after you're done listening to this episode, just search qualification and then search discovery within my podcast. Now, you'll find other podcast episodes that go into depth about what these things are. But in summary, what I'm asking you to do is ask questions to be sure you understood the scope of the problem first. You also have to be sure that you understood what they were trying to achieve first off. And you also want to understand what the deficiencies with your proposal that you have on the table. So let's go over that again. I want you to be sure that you understand the scope of the problem first. I want to be sure that you understand what they were trying to achieve, and then any deficiencies with the proposal on the table. We'll get to the price thing, yes. But when we ask ourselves these sorts of questions, or rather when we ask the potential customer these sorts of questions, we're getting to the root of the value equation. So let me give you the results of my requalification exercise and my rediscovery. So they thought that my proposal was for a limited engagement. They thought maybe it was going to be a day or two to train 2 staff people. Now, if you look at it that way, to show up to an office to talk to 2 people for 425K, only for a day or 2, an hour each. Yeah, maybe 425,000 will be on the high side. So I walked them through the actual ambit of my proposal, that this was something much more longer term. I was contemplating 3 weeks, but since it was a retail establishment, I thought it could run into 4, depending on how much traffic we have in the store during the sessions, because it was going to be an on-site training. Then on the number of staff contemplated, I pointed out that in the proposal, I had pointed out that 4 people compulsorily had to take part in the training. That's the 2 sales associates, the head honcho of the business, and also the right-hand woman of the CEO. I wanted 4 of them compulsorily to be in the training, because there's no point in training up the staff and then Oga at the top doesn't agree, and then the main administrator doesn't agree. It's just a recipe for confusion. So it was compulsory. The 4 of you guys have to be there from beginning to end every single session. But then I was also open to the manufacturing staff and delivery staff to join the training, because delivery people also have customer facing functions. Because you might do a good job, you produce wonderful stuff, the store looks correct, everybody is well trained up, but then you send out your delivery guy, they show up in their Okada and they don't look clean, they sound rude, they sound crass, and they do a poor job. And that's where your the brand perception and the brand affinity that you've been working so hard to build, that's where you guys start losing on that. So I wanted the delivery staff to be there, but at the very least 4 people compulsory, open to anybody else. Now, the reason why I take that approach is because I don't use training materials, I don't use printed text, I don't use books, I don't use stuff like that. So my actual costs don't change whether I'm training 4 people or 8 or 16. So for me, that was not a problem. Now, I also included in the quote activities that would help them discover their ICP. Oh, sorry, one moment. My attention is required outside. I will be back in a jiffy. Okay, I am back. Sorry about that. My attention was required outside. So let's see if I can remember where we were. Okay, yeah, so I was at the point where I said that since I don't use printed material and things like that, my actual costs don't change. And so because of that, I'm flexible, whether I'm training 4 or 6 or 10 or 12 or 20. So, okay, so I also included that I wanted to help them discover their ICP, because having a chat with the Oga in charge and having a chat with the 2IC, that's the personal assistant of the CEO, I didn't get a sense that they knew who the ICP was. And it's essential, because until we know who the ideal audience is, we don't know how to come up with a plan to start chasing those people down with our sales and with our marketing activities. Then I also made a provision so that I could come up with sales SOP, that's a standard operating procedure. because they have a high staff turnover, and it doesn't make sense to spend a bunch of hundred thousands on training staff only to have half of them leave later on. So it's going to be a waste of employer engagement. Employer investment. So my solution was to create an SOP so that the head manager, the second in command, could onboard future staff without my help, because it will be part of the recruitment process. But people who are being considered for the sales job, to work in the store or other customer-facing functions, would have to go through the material and be part of the interview process. People would require to go through it, be sure that it's stuff that they think that they can do. It also would be a good way to weed out the less motivated candidates, because if you're hiring someone for a sales role and then you also have a standard operating procedure and you show them the standard operating procedure beforehand, people who think it is a whole lot more than they're willing to do will swiftly opt out. And people who, although might have been good intentions, didn't quite understand the scope of what you are asking them to do, would now drop off. So chances are this would also be a good recruitment tool. So I was only able to address these concerns on the value equation because I asked them some questions. When was it that you guys wanted the training to begin? What were the deficiencies in what I put out in the plan? What did you like about the proposal? What do you think we could have done better? Blah, blah, blah. I was only asking those sorts of questions that I now knew exactly where to address and assuage their concerns. Now, of course, that didn't stop the second in command from fishing around. And so she asked me pointedly, can you do anything for us in terms of price? And my answer to the question was, sure, I can. But then, remember the episode that we made on not making unprincipled concessions. I said, sure, we can, but we'd have to take items on or off, depending on how we modify the terms of engagement. So if you want a lesser price, we have to take things off the quote. And from what you've seen, I was anticipating something beyond just coming in 2 or 3 times a week to talk to 2 people. Yes, I was going to come in, even if it was only 2 people, but it wasn't just about training these people up. It was also about coming up with a standard operating procedure and also helping them identify the ICP. In other words, I wanted to come and train them up, but then also make it possible for them to train up people on their own without having to call me all the time. That's the whole point of making sure that we have the ideal customer avatar that they can look towards so they know who they're chasing. And then there's a standard operating procedure. There's a reference thing that they can look to be sure, are we doing this right? So you don't have to call up Tavishima all the time. So that was my response. Yeah, sure, we can dance around on price, but we might have to take things on or off, depending on how we modify the agreement. So lower price, we take things off. You want more things added, then of course the price will have to go up. Now, the resolution was simple and reasonable. They said, okay, let's talk in Q1 of 2024. Now, I had already established from the previous questions that the engagement that they had in mind, they wanted it to be January of 2024, first quarter, which is kind of reasonable because in Nigeria, we had elections, the fuel price went up, and that it affected things negatively for lots of businesses. So people just found overnight the cost of production quadrupling, depending upon whatever it is that you have. If you're in the manufacturing space, things like that. So from the elections up until now, people have been trying to grapple with a couple of things. What is our new cost of doing business? How much are our cost of goods? How much manpower can we have? Where are we going to cut costs? Or where do we have to increase prices to recoup on margins? Things like that, those sorts of things. Anyway, what my prognosis was they wouldn't go ahead because they're in the middle of more staff layoffs. So for the staffs that they have, they're going to sack about half of them. So I figured this is not a priority for them right now. So honestly, I don't think that in Q1 of 2024 that they'll be ready to go ahead. But regardless, I gave a suggestion and I tried to do some value add. I told them to use listen notes, and listen as in LISTEN, and then notes, NOTES. I think it is spelt as one word, but if you just Google it, you'll find it. Now, Listen Notes is a podcast curating website that is integrated with AI, artificial intelligence. So using Listen Notes, I told them that they can search for relevant podcast episodes from my over 730 episodes that we have so far to get topics that are that the customer-facing staff might need to learn, and then you can use these podcast episodes in weekly and staff meetings, and it'll be a good way to handle sales training until they have the budget or the headspace to hire a consultant. Because in this case, you can see that budget was not the only constraint, if it wasn't constraint at all. But they also have headspace issues because, like I said, rising cost of production, they want to sack half the staff, blah, blah, blah. There's lots of stuff that is going on at the moment. They're trying to increase prices. They're trying to sack staff. It's juggling a lot of things, especially for small and medium scale enterprises in Nigeria. So that was my own suggestion about how they could get by. So Q1 we'll have that conversation of 2024. But in the meantime, this is how you can get value from me for free and train up your team. So if you sell luxury leather artisan-made handbags and you think your staff don't know how to handle price objections, just like how I handle price objections now, then what you do is you use listen notes, and then you search within my podcast. You look for topics on customer service, you look for topics on price, you look for topics on handling objections. Then you get your staff to listen to these episodes, and then you guys discuss at your next weekly staff meeting. I'm assuming that you guys have weekly staff meetings. If you don't, it's something that is recommended, especially from the sales and marketing side. Once a week, you call the salespeople, you guys have a chat. This is where we are. These are our numbers. These are our goals. These are the people we talked to last week. These are the people we should talk to this week. This is what we need to do. This is what we have outstanding. It's good to have this sort of meeting once a week, or maybe once, what's that word? Bi-weekly, once every 2 weeks with your staff. But I recommend once a week because if you do the bi-weekly thing, something happens, you travel, somebody is sick, those sorts of things. And then before you know it, you found out that for the last 2 or 3 months, you guys have only met, twice in 3 months or something. And that is not good. So you get your staff to listen to the episodes, and then you guys get to discuss. What did you listen to? What did you think? This is what I think, blah, blah, blah. Now, it might not be the best, but even this alone is going to give tremendous results, because at least you get people now thinking deliberately and thinking practically and in a process-oriented manner about how to grow sales. Because up until now, you find that most of your staff who you've hired to sell for you have been using idea or have been using packaging. If I dress right, if I wear the right kind of suit, or if I use the right kind of makeup, or if I learn how to pronounce my words better, then I should be able to close the deal. So yeah, all those things are important. Your suit, your makeup, and your enunciation, all that is good, but there's a whole lot more. You need to know the process. Now, in case your people are not listening people, they don't like listening to stuff or watching YouTube videos, that's not a problem. You can get AI on different sites. On YouTube, it already has a, what's it called? What do you call this thing? This thing that produces texts. It listens to speech and then it reduces it to text. Subtitles, like subtitling. So you can use that subtitling function to get the text from YouTube, and then for listen notes, you can also generate transcripts. So all you have to do is just use listen notes, use the AI there. I think it's a paid service as at the time of this recording. I don't know if they have a free option, but if you're a business owner listening to this episode, just check out listen notes and you find it's handy. Like I said, it's thousands of podcast episodes. So it's not just my 730 podcast episodes you find there, but any other sales consultant or business consultant that you respect or you admire, if they have a podcast, it's definitely on that site. So if you generate the transcript of the episode, you can print it out for all your staff and then use those as talking points at the next staff meeting. Okay, so for customer service issues, when somebody calls in, they're angry, they want to return the bag, what do we do? So you look at the thing and you say, okay, according to this podcast, these are the principles for handling customer service issues. Principle 1, Principle 2, Principle 3, Scenario 1, Scenario 2, Scenario 3. What do you think? And you guys have a nice, healthy argument. And the most important thing is, like I said, people are now thinking process-oriented, and they now know principles, things that they're supposed to aim for, instead of everybody just using their own idea or their own, how they feel for the day. So if somebody feels happy for that day, then the person is polite to the customer. But then the person feels like they've had a shitty day, then they tell the customer, like, hey, shut up, who do you think you are? I went to school as well, you won't talk to me like that, blah, 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 blah. Now, I'm not saying that your staff should tolerate abuse, but I'm just saying that there's an objective way for handling these things, regardless of whether you woke up on the good side of your bed or whether you woke up on the bad, on the bad side of your bed. So these are some of the things that you can do if you're listening to this show and you've been thinking about using me for training for your staff and you think that my prices are too expensive. These are options that are available. You can have the benefits of sales training and consulting for your organization for absolutely free just by using the episodes on my podcast. Now, searching within the podcast is kind of hard. That's the reason why I recommend Listen Notes, because once you get to Listen Notes, you can search Sales for the Nigerian Business Person podcast. My podcast will pop up. You click on the podcast, and then my podcast now dominates the whole page. And then you go to the search function, and you search there, and now the search is now happening within my own podcast. And then you can get to hear all my opinions and the materials that I put out there on pricing or whatever it is that you're working on. And then you can now use that to organize your staff training, and you're going to get tremendous benefit from that. Now, the only cost to you is going to be this. That's the cost of transcription if you don't want to put your people through the hassle of listening to the audio. And then, of course, the cost of paper and printer, if you're going to be printing out for your staff, let's say you have 8-10 staff, then you're also going to need time to organize the meeting. And then, of course, I'd recommend that you buy Fanta and Coke for everybody, or, Fanta and Bonds, or, whatever. If you're a bougie organization, maybe you buy pizza. But I recommend that you do something around that so you can see that the cost is minimal. Fanta and Coke, paper and ink, and then the time. You guys sit down for 1 hour or 1.5 hours to have a conversation, and you can see that it's something reasonable. So remember, it doesn't have to be my podcast. You can do that with any business or sales or marketing podcast. So long as you agree with the methodology, you agree with it, you think it makes sense. Listen Notes, it's a catalog of thousands of podcasts. And every single one of my 730 episodes are there. So it's not just me. Anybody you respect. If you're a Pat Flynn person, okay, Pat Flynn is more like online marketing. So if you're a Pat Flynn person, go to Listen Notes. It's all there. Click the AI thing, ask for the transcribe. You get it there. You take it. You discuss with your staff. So now that's it. Anyway, summary. Back to the situation. So how did this meeting end? Everyone was happy. I'm still friends. I'm still friends with the second in command, and I'm still head with the head honcho. I'm still head with the CEO. And the thing is, whether we do business together in the future or not, we're still friends, because I did my best to handle the objection adequately and professionally without taking offense. Because there's some people who will be seriously offended. Like, you look at me up and down. I told you 425K. I'd even say 60K. So you rate me as if I'm a riffraff, Abi. Some people do take offense at those sorts of things. So we're still friends. There's no malice. And if we run into each other socially or professionally, it's not a problem. Nobody feels taken advantage of. They don't feel like I pushed them into an unconscionable contract. In fact, I haven't tried to give them value regarding the circumstances. And I don't feel like I had to make any unprincipled concessions. So everybody is fine. There's no harm and there is no foul. So are there other ways to handle these price objections? Sure. And we're going to explore them in future episodes. But for now, let me just give a simple outline. Number one, when people give an objection, listen, don't get angry, don't get defensive. It's not about you. People are just looking at things from the price value equation. If they can, they would like to get as much as what they can by paying the least possible. It's just a human thing. You do it too. So please, business people, stop getting angry when people give you the price objection. It's just normal. You do it too. You get into the store, you see this Samsung TV, and you're like, wow, this TV is sweet. It's 20 feet long and blah blah blah. You ask the person says it's 5 mil, and you say 5M, bros, I beg, will you take 3.2? It's normal. You do it. So don't get angry. Then ask questions and then delve deeper. That's what I was talking about, discovery and then qualification. So you want to be sure when you're asking the questions, are you talking to the right person? Do they have the authority to sign off on this thing? Do you understand the problem right? Did your proposal fall short? Were there some things you didn't understand? Try and figure out what are the other things that you can include to remedy the situation. And then you also need to figure out if they have a problem that is worth solving. Because if you're talking sales training to people and they're in the middle of laying off half of their staff and they're trying to battle with the rising costs of production and energy costs, it's possible. Do these people even have a headspace for this problem yet? So you need to figure out, where their headspace at, where they are, and if this is a problem, what's solving. So people trying to get a handle on fixed cost and on variable cost, etc., those sorts of things, they probably don't have a feel like they have a problem that is worth solving for now. Then, of course, you need to figure out if they're still interested. And then with the new information that you have, you can now craft a proposal. And remember, no unprincipled concessions. If the money goes down, ask for something in turn, or else you're going to go into this engagement with anger and resentment, and it's not a good recipe for success, and it just means that the future fight is already fermenting, it's already brewing. They will say something, and before you know it, they will say A, you will say B, and then before you know it, there's quarrel because you feel taken advantage of. That you came in here with a 425k proposal, and you guys haggle back and forth, and they rate you as if you're nothing, and so you took 125, and then you thought 3 weeks, but the thing has now spilled into 5, and you're now thinking, these idiots, I'm here, they only gave me 125k, and here I am, I'm still spending time with them 5 weeks later, and these things can go. There's a way that these things can just, escalate. So remember, I'll say overall, be pleasant and be understanding. So let's just recap. Listen to the objection, ask questions, and delve deeper. You need to understand what's going on. Figure out, are they still interested? With the new information, craft a new proposal. And then after that, and then don't make any unprincipled concessions, and then be pleasant and be understanding. But my ultimate warning I'd like to give you guys is this. Let's remember that there's no such thing as too expensive, okay? There is no such thing as too expensive. There is only this thing is valuable or this thing is not valuable enough for the price. Now, this is an example. I was chilling with my friend Niamaka of Magnisi. They're an Abuja designer of bespoke artisan leather bags. Artisan, is it artisan? Well, handmade anyway, as in it's not a machine thing. So lots of love and care gets put into these sorts of things. So I was in the store, and then the lady walked into the store, and I was eavesdropping on the conversation. The lady compared a particular model of the bag. So I don't know if you call bags models, anyway, whatever you call it. She looked at a particular model of a bag, and she compared it to a Balenciaga, and they talked about quality and the leather and the this and this and that. And then the lady promptly on the spot bought one, and then placed an order for 2 more that were yet to be produced. Now, if you ask me, I would never pay hundreds of thousands to buy handbags because Tavishima Ayede would say, that is too expensive. But the other lady looked at these things, thought they were as good as Balenciagas or whatever handbag. Sorry, forgive me, Balenciagas are not even bags. I know it was one of these fancy Italian names, so I'm sure those of you who are handbag ladies, you know, I'm sure you get a sense of what she was talking about. So the other lady looks at it and thinks, man, these are as good as Balenciagas. And she's like, give me this one, and then give me 2 of this other one. So, oh no, these 2, yes, they're on the catalog, but they're not out yet. And I say, no, wahala, I'll pay 3 handbags. So this lady thinks it's a bargain, but Tavishima Ayede, thinks this is too expensive. Now, is there really such a thing as this is too expensive? Or Tavishima thinks there is no value in this, while the other person thinks this value makes mad sense. So don't take it personal when someone says you're too expensive. It's not a jab at you. It's all about price-value equations that are relative to particular people. So if you refocus the conversation and redo the proposal, you'll be fine. Or if you disqualify the person and look for other people who are much more educated or who are much more in tune with these value prerogatives, then you'll do okay. So if you sell Balenciaga bags and somebody like Tavishima Ayede, me, I walk into your store, don't say because you listen to my podcast and you like me and you respect me. If I say, man, this is too expensive, you know what you need to do. If you can't refocus the conversation, find a way of shifting me out of the store so that people who value it can come in and buy, people who find it valuable. So don't waste your time being offended that I walk into your store and I say this is too expensive, because after all, there's some things that I would buy that some other people would never buy, because I love swatches, but some people like Swatch. Like, why are you buying the Swatch? It's not a plastic watch. Buy a Casio. But like, hey, I like my swatches. So it's just one of those things. So the next time somebody tells you you're too expensive, just calm down, breathe, take the time out to try and figure out if there's no value for them in what you offer. Now, if you can make the value equation, then go ahead. If you can't satisfy the value equation, let them go. because if you try and force through, there's going to be plenty of quarrel and dissatisfaction that's brewing in the future. So that's it for today. That's all, folks. Remember to connect with me on WhatsApp or Telegram. Hit me up on 080-6466-2140. The country code is +234. That's for those of you who are hitting me up outside the shores of Nigeria. Also, connect with me on LinkedIn. The name is Tabashima Ayede. You can confirm the spelling of my name and email address on the website where you're listening to this episode, or the profile of the podcast app where you're listening to my voice. Of course, you'll see my details there if you decide to check out the podcast on Listen Notes. So thanks for your time and attention. I will catch you guys at the next episode.